Math.
Can you hear me way back there? All
It's
right.
been
How's
32
it?
years, 32 years since I graduated
Donna.
high school.
There you go. Perfect.
Karina, okay, hi guys. Glad you're here. I'm glad you guys are here. Just a footnote, if you're on here watching, then you don't have the problem, but there's a bunch of people that haven't been able to, I didn't add to the Facebook group because they came in too late, and they're solely relying on the YouTube channel, and if one of those are your friends or somebody, let them know. We'll have the missing weeks up there this weekend, hopefully. Okay, so, and then the other thing is, I'm not sure, I'll post it next week. If the Western Club is open, we'll be meeting there. If it's not, we'll be meeting here. And if we meet over there, it's gonna be back at 6:30. Okay, so we started on 6 and 7. Has anybody got any questions on what we talked about last week? We went over a lot of stuff last week. I hope it's useful for you. So have you ever had a defect and you asked God, told God you were entirely ready for Him to remove it, but He didn't remove it? Has that happened to you yet? I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's not God's job to do 6 and 7. It's your job. And the step tells us that we were entirely ready, you know, and if you read the 2 paragraphs in the big book, it kind of insinuates that there's not much work on your part, on your end, that has to be done, but quite the contrary. So the entirely ready part is, you know, God knows when you're entirely ready or not. And so, how you doing, man? So, you know, it's not for God to remove these things from you. It's for you to start working on changing and asking God for help in the process. And then, when you ask God for help and you put forth some effort, God helps you. And it becomes a little easier to do that. Prayer alone does not constitute entirely. That's my point, you know. Just praying, this alone, doesn't constitute entirely ready. And the difference in humbly and entirely is or in prayer is the humbly part is again the same thing. Is what am I doing? Or what am I denying myself? What am I not doing? Remember we said we're gonna slay the defect with non-action, and we're gonna change the defect with action, right? So it takes a degree of humility and to deny myself something that I'm used to doing, something that's second nature to me, or something that I want to do. No, there's a degree of humility in not doing that. Don't do what you want to do. Make yourself do what you don't want to do, and that's how you change. So we need to learn how to let go of negative things. I have the 2 monkey stories. I don't know if we talked about the one first, but down in Central or South America, they have how they used to catch the monkeys. They'd climb up in the tree and they'd notch a little hole, just a little round small hole in the tree, and then they'd take a stick and they'd take some food and they'd stick it in there, and they'd pull the stick out and leave the food in there, and then they'd go away. And after some period of time, the monkey would come and he'd stick his hand in there and he'd grab the food, and he couldn't get his hand out, he was stuck. And they would come back hours later or the next day and they'd throw a net over the monkey, and that's how they'd capture the monkeys. And the whole time, all the monkey had to do was let go, and he would have been free. So you monkeys need to learn how to let go, and you'll be free, instead of carrying all that stuff around. You know, so that's my one monkey story, and that happens to be a true story. The other one is another true story. In Central America, these very rich people got together and decided to build a resort, and they built this resort, and in the resort they were building a top-notch golf course. And I don't know if you have any idea, but to build a golf course is very expensive. Very expensive. But they built this elaborate golf course. Beautiful thing. And they didn't know, or they weren't aware, or they didn't prepare for the fact that once they opened the golf course, and they left all the beautiful trees all in the forest, in the jungle there, and the monkeys were all in the trees. And the guys would hit the ball and land over there, and the monkey would come down, grab the ball, and throw the ball, or run away with the ball. And so, you know, they got together, and this is true, they got together and they thought, well, what can we do here? And so they you know, they even discussed about putting poison out and killing the monkeys, but they decided that wouldn't be a good move because publicity would really sink them on that one. And so they spent lots of money, lots of times trying all different things. But whatever they tried, it didn't work because the monkeys would come down, grab the balls, and run away or throw the balls, right? And so they had a meeting one day, and they came up with the simplest plan they could come up with. Somebody said, why don't we just have a rule that you play the ball where the monkey drops it? Now, I don't know if this place is still in existence because this was a good 20 years ago, but in that golf course in Central America, the rule there was you play the ball where the monkey drops.
Monkey scramble.
You know, and so, but that's another example of how we try to make shit work. That, you know, we try to take negative action or positive action on a negative thing and try to make that work. What is this now? Okay. So that's pretty funny there. So that's what we got to do in life. We got to learn how to play the ball where the monkey drops it, and get out of all the the control business. Remember back in step 3 we talked about the important thing in step 3 was getting out of result business, right? But if we get out of the result business, then we don't have to worry about all that stuff. We just go through life and learn how to play the ball where the monkey drops it. And learn how to let go. Okay? So we got to get rid of the negative things in our life and move on with positive things. Okay. So here's the... let's talk before we go through the exercise. So when we were drinking and using, we tried to fill this emptiness up with all the wrong things. Alcohol, drugs, food, other control of other people. All these expressions, all these are expressions of people who don't have the principles for living, really. That's what that amounts to. And these compulsions, they're just symptoms. They're symptoms of the problem, and the steps don't deal with the symptoms. We talked about that before. Codependency, all of that stuff. The steps teach us how to live. If we're learning how to live and practice the principles, then the problem won't be there because it's really just a symptom. And we talked about that last week. All right. So how do we do this? And what is the difference between I don't know if we've covered this, but between a wrong or I've been in meetings, I've heard people describe the difference between a shortcoming and a defect, and there is no difference. Bill Wilson said there is no difference. He just didn't want to keep using the same word. No, wrong, fault, shortcoming, defect. Steps 4, 5, 6, 7, he uses those words. Wrong, fault, shortcoming, defect, or defect, shortcoming, and they all mean the same thing. But what does it mean when you have a shortcoming? Does anybody know what that means?
You lack something.
So again, shortcoming and defect being the same thing, but what does it mean when you have a shortcoming? Why do they use that term, shortcoming? Anybody?
If you're striving for a defined ideal, for simplicity, let's say honesty. So you're striving for honesty. When you fall somewhere short of honesty, dishonest, that would be
Okay, take that, what you just said, right? And picture that with a scale, okay, so to speak. So here's a scale. Scale from 1 to 10 or whatever, doesn't matter. So if this end of the scale, if a 10 is being really honest, right, using your example, and on this end, a 1 is being not very honest at all, right? And your shortcoming is you're about a 2, right? So you're long on the negative and you're short on the positive. Okay? So that's kind of why they use that terminology. It's like a scale thing, and your shortcoming means that you're long on the negative end of it. But it's nothing more than a defect. Okay? So next time you're in a meeting, a guy explains the difference. I heard a guy say another golf thing. He said it was great. It wasn't true, but it was a great story he shared about what's the defect and the shortcoming. I don't remember if I know it, if I can repeat it, but he said something about, you know,
I've heard it, I think.
I've heard.
yeah, you know, when you hit the ball and into the rough there, and that's a defect. But when you go and you kick it out into the green, that's a shortcoming. They're both the same thing, but that's a cute little analogy of it. Okay, so we make our list. We make our list of all our defects. I don't know if you guys did that yet. But you make the list of, starting from your most blaring defects. You make a list of what they are, okay? And then on the other side of the paper, you need to write down the opposite. And I gave you guys sheets. You didn't get one, huh? I'll give you one. I gave you guys sheets that have all examples of different things and the opposites of them. They're good sheets to use to help you with it, right? And so now you have a list of your defects and a list of the opposites. And what I do in the morning for my 11th step is I just simply, and I've been doing this for many years, I just simply incorporate my 6th and 7th step in there. And I just ask God for awareness of whatever defect I need to work on today. And that's all I ask for, just the awareness. And that's really all I need to ask for. The rest is my job, okay? And so, of course, I want to pay attention throughout the day of all my defects, but you know, people like us, we're very addicted to what we want, and how addicted we are to what we think is going to make us happy, right? Now, how are you comfortable when you always have to prove something? It's tough. And most of my life, I always felt worse than you, so I tried to act better than you. I pretended. I pretended it didn't hurt. I pretended I wasn't afraid. I pretended I didn't have guilt and shame. And that's how I went through life. Because my philosophy was, if something's good, I can't get enough of it, then more is better, right? Doesn't that make sense? People like us, we need everyone, wanted no one, and used anyone. And I was never, even when I got sober, it was really amplified when I got sober. I was never comfortable to be where I was. My head was always someplace else. You know, and that's one of the greatest gifts that recovery has given me, is that my head is where my feet are. It's a nice place to be. So, why am I telling? What does all this have to do with 6 and 7? This is all what we're about. When understanding what we're about, and we've been working on our self-will and working on our defects, then we get to understand these things and we start changing them. We get to learn how to live with the disease without being in dis-ease. Okay, so now we have our list of defects, right? And now we have our list of the opposites. So, and we've gotten to this point. I want to tell you this. You might want to write this down. The first 3 steps, 1, 2, 3, teach me how to survive my feelings. 1, 2, 3, teach me how to survive my feelings. Steps 4 and 5 show me how my thinking works. Steps 4 and 5 show me how my thinking works. Step 6 is the attitude that thinking produces. I'll say that again. Step 6 is the attitude that thinking produces. And step 7 is the behavior of that attitude. You got that? So 1, 2, 3 teach me how to survive my feeling. 4 and 5 show me how my thinking works. Step 6 is the attitude that thinking produces. And step 7 is the behavior of that attitude. Does that make sense to you? Now, that's an important little graph there, because the whole name of the game here, of course, is change, right? And what we said in step 6 is an act of defiance, and step 7 is the act of submission. I'm going to defy the defect with non-action, and I'm going to submit to the opposite with action. So if I do a good 4th and 5th step, I get to see how my thinking works. And then in 6, I get to realize the attitude that thinking produces. And in 7, I realize the behavior of that attitude. And I can change all of that stuff once I'm aware of it. I don't know about you guys, but I never once in my life, and I was 32 when I got sober, 33, I can't remember, something like that. But I never once in my life stopped and thought about the attitude my thinking produces, or the behavior of that attitude. I don't know if you have, but I never did. Why? I didn't give a shit. I didn't care if my actions or my thinking, the attitude that thinking produced, or the behavior of that attitude affected you in any negative way. So what? Not my problem. Deal with it. You know, and that's just, you know, when you're trying to live along spiritual lines, then you realize that's not a very good way to live. So, and that's why I put that on the board today. 1, 2, 3 is give up. 4, 5, 6 own up. 7, 8, 9 make up. 10, 11, 12 is grow up. Hello, hello, hello.
Okay, y'all can start now.
Oh, okay. Well, we started 20 minutes ago.
No, you didn't.
Yeah. 6 o'clock.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah. I posted it for 2 weeks in a row. 6 o'clock. That's okay. Sit down and catch
So you only
up.
got 40 minutes left.
God damn it.
Because they have a meeting here at 7:30, so we need to be out of here. And I'm going to find out later if the Donna, I see you're on there, Donna. Do you know anything about the Western Club? Are they opening? Send a little message through if you know.
They're meeting tomorrow.
Oh, they're meeting tomorrow. Okay. So if they open, we'll be there next week at 6:30 at normal time. But okay. So what was I talking about? So we're talking about that the attitude that my thinking produces, right, and the behavior of that attitude. And those two things, again, never meant nothing to me, but now, sober, living a spiritual life, working, doing spiritual principles, I look at that and I go, oh shit. I can see how that this thinking produces an attitude, and that this attitude produces a behavior, and I don't like that, and I need to change it. And so I put it on my list, and then I put the opposites down, and I start working on that. And I start changing that. Okay. So now, going back to, so how do I work on some things, some defects? Because that's, some people always ask questions like, patience. There's some defects that, if we're going to try to practice the opposite of them, it's nearly impossible to until you are confronted with that defect. So I get up in the morning, in my 11th step, I incorporate my 6 and 7, and I think about, okay, today I need awareness on patience, right? But that in and of itself is not going to amount to anything. I don't really get an opportunity to practice it until I become impatient, right? Once I become impatient, then I need to recognize that, stop that, and do the opposite. You're mumbling there, Dad, what?
Just wondering why work people are texting me
Oh.
at being closed for an hour. Anyway,
Okay. I thought you were mumbling about patience.
I need some patience right now.
Yeah, you can practice.
So I'm born and raised in New York City, and I grew up my whole life driving in New York City, and you've probably seen movies with the traffic in New York City, and I'm one of these guys that I can go from this lane to that lane, in and out, and get fast. I'm good at that. So now I come to Oklahoma, and they're driving like this. And so early in my sobriety, I didn't have a lot of patience on the road. I have a ton of patience. I don't care what anybody. If you want to go fast, you go. I'll move over for you. If you're going too slow, I'll go around you, and I ain't got a bitch about none of it. No, I don't have any problems driving today. I have absolutely zero frustration in driving today. But it wasn't always like that. It was very much the opposite for a long time.
So what did you do?
But I practiced patience. I practiced being patient when I was impatient. I practiced being patient when I was intolerant. I practiced also in intolerance, I practiced kindness. I just had one of my guys text me before the meeting that he's been working on this stuff now, and he says he's very spiritual. So I text him back, I said, good, I'll tell the Pope. But he's been practicing this stuff, and it's working. It works. I hate to say this stupid cliche, but it works if you work it. It really does. So, yeah, so today I could get on the road and I don't have not one little iota of impatience driving. I drive my way. If you don't like it, I'll go around you. And if you need to go faster than me, I'll move over and let you go faster than me. I don't have a problem with none of that stuff. You know, even when somebody is in front of me with their left blinker on and makes a right turn, that used to drive me nuts. I used to want to get out and fucking let them know how stupid they are. And I just go today, I just go, oh well, there you go. You know, it means nothing to me today. It's not worth the effort of being upset. Okay, but that's just an example of something that that you can practice only when it occurs. Okay. Let's see. I had a couple of them here. So a lot of people come into the rooms and they have they suffer from really low self-esteem. So what do we do about that? Esteemable acts. Okay. Well, first of all, what does it mean when somebody has low self-esteem?
Low self-worth.
low self-worth. Yeah. Make it really simple for the new people or the people that you're working with. It's a low evaluation of your character. That's what it is. It's a low evaluation of your character. That's what low self-esteem is. And so here's something that we need to understand about 6 and 7. That almost always the action is never the defect. Almost always the action is never the defect. What do I mean by that? Let me give you just an example or two. So let's say somebody's running around the room and he's nailing everything that ain't nailed down, right? And so your first thought would say, just a horny little bastard, right? And that's probably the furthest from the truth that there is. It's got nothing to do with that. In my case, it was, I thought I was oversexed when I found out I was really undersecure. So the defect, the action is rarely the defect. It's always some underlining things. Or let's say somebody is, somebody's bragging all the time about themselves. You know, you tend to have a low opinion of somebody that does that, right? And so what do you call that? What would you call that?
Always bragging on themselves?
Yeah.
I would call it arrogant.
Arrogant, okay. Okay. That's a good label to put on it. It's probably not true.
Probably the opposite.
I don't know if it's the opposite, but there's definitely an underlying thing there. And it's usually low self-esteem. You know, a low evaluation of their character. And so, in order for them to feel okay, they have to pretend. We just talked about that a minute ago. They have to act out. They have to pretend. Pretend that they're okay. Pretend that everything's great. Pretend that they're not hurting. Pretend that they're not, scared. And so they tell you all the great things they accomplish, whether they're true or not.
An egomaniac with poor self-esteem.
An egomaniac with poor self-esteem. Yeah, there's a lot of us like that. Yeah. So what I'm saying to you is before you start labeling, putting a label on it, we need to put a label on it. We need to label the defects, for sure. But before you label it, you should sit down and talk about it with someone. And so you know that you have the right label on it. Because it's not, he's a horny little bastard, or it's not that he's so arrogant, The chances are that the action is not the defect. There's some underlying things that, we're just not okay. We're not well people. There's lots wrong with us. And a lot has to be done about that. Okay. Who's got questions? Anybody got questions on 6 and 7? I got things I'm going to read to you. I always read these things when it comes to 6 and 7. Nobody got a question? Okay. So here's one that somebody sent me. Here's April 17, 2003 at 10:57 in the morning. Okay. It's about Socrates, who much was said that he was to hold knowledge in high esteem, right? So one day an acquaintance met the great philosopher and said, "Socrates, do you know what I just heard about your friend?" "Hold on a minute," Socrates replied. "Before telling me anything, I'd like you to pass a little test. is called the triple filter test. Triple filter, did I say? That's right, Socrates, continue. Before you talk to me about my friend, it might be a good idea to take a moment and filter what you're going to say. The first filter is truth. Have you made absolutely sure that what you're about to tell me is true? No, the man said. Actually, just heard about it and, all right, Socrates said. So you don't really know if it's true or not. Now let's try the second filter. The filter of goodness. Is what you're about to tell me about my friend something good? No, on the contrary. So Socrates said, you want to tell me something bad about him, but you're not certain if it's true. You may still pass the test, though, because there's one filter left. The filter of usefulness. Is what you want to tell me about my friend going to be useful to me? No, not really. Well concluded, Socrates. If what you want to tell me is neither true, nor good, nor even useful, why tell it to me at all? And the message there is about, stop talking about other people. Don't have a conversation about a third person if they're not present. What a simple rule. Don't have a conversation about a third party if they're not present. That's going to eliminate a lot of shit that we get ourselves into. Okay, this is a good one. This one was sent to me October 19th, 2005 at 7:27 a.m. It's a moral question. So here's the question. And actually, this is, oh yeah, this was actually a question on a job for a high-paying executive job with a big corporation. And the question was, you're driving down the road in your car on a wild, stormy night. When you pass by a bus stop, you see 3 people waiting for the bus. 1, an old lady who looks as if she was about to die. 2, an old friend who once saved your life. And 3, the perfect partner you have been dreaming about your whole life. Which one would you choose to offer a ride to, knowing that there could only be 1 passenger in your car? Think before you continue reading. So this is a moral, ethical dilemma, right? You can pick up the old lady because she's going to die, unless you save her life, or you can take the old friend because he once saved your life. Or however, you may not ever be able to find that perfect match again. So what your answer is very interesting. And the guy that got the job, this was his answer. He said, I would give the car keys to my old friend and let him take the lady to the hospital, and I would stay behind and wait for the bus with the partner of my dreams. That's a great answer. I never thought of that. It didn't cross my mind. When I heard that question, I went, well, I'm taking her and we're out of here, you know. He'll understand that she's dying anyway. Fuck it. Well, let's see, 2005. How sober was I then? Let's see.
15 years.
About 14 years, yeah.
I thought just leave the friend and the old lady there. 'Cause, well, the friend had saved your life before. He could save hers, and you could have the partner of your dreams.
Yeah. But anyway, that's an answer that I never thought of. Okay. And there's another one. So there's a lady. This lady dies, and they have her wake. And at the wake, her 2 daughters are there. And the one daughter meets this guy there that's at the wake, and they start talking, and they're talking for hours. Guy of her dreams, perfect in every way. And then, you know, when he left, she realized, I didn't get his number. I didn't give him my number. And 2 days later, she killed her sister. Why do you think she killed her sister? What's the answer to that? Why did she kill her sister?
So he would show up, so he would show up at the wake as well.
What else? Anybody else think of something?
You'd have to read it again.
I asked two of my daughters that, and my daughter Angela said what you just said, and that's the correct answer. That hoping that he would show up at the wake, but the bad news is that if you got that right, you're a sociopath.
I'm scared now.
I knew my daughter Angela was anyway, but she confirmed it with that
You had it
answer.
quick too.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, she got it quick, right? Natural, Melissa. All right. All right.
Is that true? Should I do?
That's what the thing said. It's
Well, be
some
nice.
psychologist.
Oh,
Pretty good girl.
Okay, I got a couple more things to read. The mayonnaise jar. I don't know if you ever heard this one. When things in your life seem almost too much to handle, when 24 hours in a day is not enough, remember the mayonnaise jar and 2 cups of coffee. A professor stood before his philosophy class and had some items in front of him. When the class began, wordlessly he picked up a very large and empty mayonnaise jar and fills it with golf balls. He asked the students if the jar was full. They agreed it was. The professor then picked up a box of pebbles and poured it into the jar. He shook the jar lightly. The pebbles rolled into the open areas between the golf balls. He then asked the students again if the jar was full. They agreed it was. The professor next picked up a box of sand and poured it into the jar. Of course, the sand filled up everything else. He asked once more if the jar was full. The students responded with a unanimous yes. The professor then produced 2 cups of coffee from under the table and poured the entire contents into the jar, effectively filling the empty space between the sand. The students all laughed. Now, said the professor, I want you to recognize that this jar represents your life. The golf balls are the important things. God, family, children, health, friends, and favorite passions. Things that if everything else was lost, only they remained, your life would still be full. The pebbles are the things that matter, like your job, house, car. The sand is everything else, the small stuff. If you put the sand in the jar first, there's no room for the pebbles or the golf balls. The same goes for life. If you spend all your time and energy on the small stuff, you'll never have time for the important stuff. So pay attention to the things that are critical to your happiness. Worship with your family, play with your children, talk to your partner, take your partner out to dinner, spend time with good friends. There will always be time to clean the house and fix the dripping tap. Take care of the golf balls first, the things that really matter. Set your priorities. The rest is just sand. One of the students raised their hand and inquired what the coffee represented. The professor smiled and said, I'm glad you asked. It just goes to show that no matter how full your life may seem, there's always room for a couple of cups of coffee with a friend. That's a good one. I actually have some copies of that stuff if you want. Okay, I'm going to read you one more thing and then we're going to go over some questions and then I got one thing to read you left. This is a question. Are you a carrot, an egg, or a coffee bean? A young woman went to her grandmother and told her about her life and how things were so hard. She did not know how she was going to make it and wanted to give up. She was tired of fighting and struggling and seemed that as one problem was solved, a new one arose. Her grandmother took her to the kitchen. She filled 3 pots with water and placed each on a high fire. Soon the pots came to a boil. In the first, she placed carrots. In the second, she placed eggs. And in the last, she placed coffee beans. She let them sit and boil without saying a word. In about 20 minutes, she turned off the burners. She fished the carrots out and placed them in a bowl. Then she pulled the eggs out and placed them in a bowl. And she ladled some coffee out and placed it in a bowl. Turning to her granddaughter, she asked, tell me, what do you see? The granddaughter said, carrots, eggs, and coffee. She brought her closer and asked her to feel the carrots. She did and noted that they were soft. She then asked her to take an egg and break it. After pulling off the shell, she observed the hard-boiled egg. Finally, she asked her to sip the coffee. The granddaughter smiled as she tasted its aroma. The grandmother then asked, "What does it mean?" The granddaughter asked, "What does it mean?" My grandmother explained that each of these objects had faced the same adversity, boiling water, but each reacted differently. The carrot went in strong, hard, and unrelenting. However, after being subjected to the boiling water, it softened and became weak. The egg had been fragile. Its thin outer shell had protected its liquid interior, but after sitting through the boiling water, its inside became hardened. The ground coffee beans were unique, however. After they were in the boiling water, they had changed the water. "Which are you?" she asked her granddaughter. "When adversity knocks on your door, how do you respond? Are you a carrot, an egg, or a coffee bean?" The carrot seems strong, but with pain and adversity, it wilts and becomes soft and loses its strength. An egg starts off malleable, hard, but changes with the heat. Do I have a fluid spirit? But after a death or a breakup or some other trial, have I become hardened and stiff? Does my shell look the same, but on the inside am I bitter and tough and stiff spirit and hardened? Or am I like the coffee bean? The bean actually changes the water. The very circumstances that brings the pain. When the water gets hot, it releases the fragrance and flavor of your life. If you're like the bean, when things are at their worst, you get better and change the situation around you. When the hours are the darkest and the trials are the greatest, do you elevate to another level? How do you handle adversity? Are you changed by your surroundings, or do you bring life and flavor to them? Are you a carrot, an egg, or a coffee bean? So I always read these things. They're silly, they're funny, they're cute, but they're very meaningful in 6 and 7, because this is where we're actually starting to change who we are. This is where we're starting to change our personality and try to be someone else. You know? And I could have spent my whole life being a carrot or an egg, but today I want to be a coffee bean. You know, I could have spent my whole life worrying about the sand, but today I want to concentrate on the golf balls. You know, so they're great analogies of how we want to change and be somebody different. The name of the game is change. Recovery is about different. So, change and different. So I'm going to give you a psychological thing that'll help you when you're working with other people. It's called the belief question. What do you mean or think? A value question. What do you like, enjoy, or is important? So when you're working with other people, you can get down to, when you ask a what question and never a why question, you can get down to something positive and something solid quickly. And this is just information for you to help when you're working with other people. So in other words, what do you like? What do you enjoy?
Sports.
Sports. So, if I said to you, why do you enjoy sports? You can tell me all kinds of stuff. But if I ask you, what about sports do you like? What is it about sports that you like? You have to be specific. And whatever you answer with that, I can take that answer and ask you again, what about that do you? And by the time after 2 or 3 questions, we're down to there's no room for you to use your imagination or anything. Because we've gone through belief and value questions, and now we're at the core of what's really important. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's just a great tool when you're working with somebody. That'll help you. Did that make any sense to you? Okay. All right. So, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Joe and Charlie, but old man Joe, he wrote this thing that I'm about to read for you, and it's, they're both dead now, Joe and Charlie, but they were sober for many years, and they were real big book guys, but Joe wrote this thing, okay, and he says, what he wrote is, I have a pretty rocking chair down in my office. When I first bought that building, someone had run off and left it behind. There wasn't anything there of any value, but there was this old rocking chair. It was a horrible looking mess, painted black with one of the rungs broken out of the back of it. I decided I'd keep it, thinking maybe one day I might put it together. Quite a few years went by and it just sat up in the attic. Several times some of my guys tempted me to throw it away. In fact, I'd find it around by the dumpster and I'd bring it back in saying I was going to look at it one of these days. So I finally got this old rocking chair out of the attic and into the light downstairs so I could really see it. As I began to look at it, I saw it was really a fine chair. I got some paint stripper and began to strip it. I stripped all of the paint away and found that it was solid oak. I took the old ragged bottom that had been covered up many times with different cloths and tacks, and I tore it off and threw it all away. There was one broken rung, and I made an identical one by bending one and putting it in there. I sanded and refinished this chair. Finally, I took it to the upholstery shop. I asked the man how much it would cost to put a nice white velvet bottom on it. He looked at it and he said, I'll be glad to do that for you, but before I fix it, I'd like to offer you $350 for it. That beautiful, valuable chair was always there. It was there all the time. It was simply covered up. That chair had always been beautiful since the guy that made it. And that's the way I am and you are, with God's life inside us. God made us this way, beautiful and valuable. Like the old rocking chair, over a period of years, I covered myself up with all sorts of things and made a big mess. The steps have enabled me to uncover, discover, and discard. It's a program of getting rid of the things to get down to what we want. I thought that was pretty cool writing from Joe. So that's what we're talking about. Uncover, discover, discard, get rid of the things that don't work. Remember we talked about the hot air balloon going up? In order for the hot air balloon to go up, you have to throw out the bags of sand. So when we talk about change, we're not talking about, the question is not what am I going to get if I change. The question is what am I willing to let go of in order to change? What am I willing to give up? What am I willing to let go of so I can change? Don't be stuck with all these things, these thoughts of the past, the way I've always lived my life. So, okay, so we're back to our list, right? So on our list, we got our list of defects, and we have the list of the opposite. So the exercise is this. I'm going to take one of them, the most glaring and blaring, and I'm going to practice for a week or so, every day, make a conscious effort throughout the day to not do the defect and to make myself do the opposite. And be aware of any time I'm going into that defect or thinking about that defect and stopping myself and making myself do the opposite. And throughout the day, any chance I get to practice that opposite. I also want to keep in mind all my other defects, but I want to hone in on that one defect. And I want to do that every day. And when you work with your sponsor, you find out where are your weak points. what do you suffer from low self-esteem? You'll learn all this from your fourth step. Remember, we go through that, and we pinpointed all that stuff with the fourth step, right? Where does your anger come from? Where does your fear come from? You learn all that in your fourth step, when you went over your fifth step. So, you know, what do I need to work on? Do I need to practice the seemable things? Do I need to do these different things? If I have a low evaluation of my character, what can I do to bring that up? That's really practicing 6 and 7. That's actually practicing 6 and 7. Is not doing what I want to do, making myself do what I don't want to do. And that's how I'll produce change. That's what I'm here to change. The name of the game is change. How do we change? We stop doing the defect. So here's, in a nutshell, here's what you want to do. Stop doing what you know is wrong and practice right as you understand it. Stop doing what you know is wrong and practice right as you understand it. If you can get that much accomplished, you're going to be doing real well. So we got 5 minutes. We got a little more than 5 minutes. Does anybody got any questions? Anybody want to discuss any of this? We've got time. Let's see if anybody here's got questions. Anybody here got questions? Stan Crowley, how are you, buddy? Anybody got questions on you? No? Going once? Going twice? We'll just quit early today if nobody's got questions.
I can't believe it.
All right. I will post. Be aware of the post. I will post what time and where we're meeting next week. If it's here, it'll be 6 o'clock. If it's at the Western Club, it'll be 6:30.
I'm practicing being on time places.
Well, okay. If that's a defect, then. All right then. Thanks, guys.
I'm like
Appreciate it.
15 minutes early.